Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. Joining me, as always, is my awesome co-host, the intellectual rock star himself, Delicious Dwaylon Davis.
Hey, everybody.
And today's topic actually came courtesy of an email from our friend, the former co-host, Kyle, who actually sent an email to both me and Dwayne. He sent it to me, Dwaylon, and the podcast account.
Yeah, yeah.
So we definitely got this, and he was just posing a question, and I liked it so much, and I put it up to Dwaylen. I was like, you know what? I said that sounds like actually a pretty good topic for the show, and Dwaylen agreed, and because that's how we roll. We actually talk about things like this.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're like, it's yeah, we'll have it as part of the show. I don't know if it'd be entire topic. And I
Yeah.
don't know if we can get enough. Um, but this one, I think we can definitely get enough out of it to make it a full topic. And he said, gentlemen, we're watching a lot of wrestlers from our childhood pass away, which is unfortunate because we just
Yeah.
lost Iron Sheik, we just lost Super
Yeah.
Billy Graham.
hmm
He said, you both go to wrestling events, conventions, fan fests. Can you give a top three of wrestlers you'd like to meet, think, or converse with while you still have the opportunity? I'm like, you know what? And then you have to put a lot of thought into it too.
hmm
So I like that. And he said he always sees Scott Steiner whenever he gets a chance because Kyle is a huge Scott Steiner fan.
Yeah.
Um, but he's got also Goldberg, Lex Luger, and Buff Bagwell. And he'd also like to hear stories from Jerry the King Lawler. And the next one, um, little little surprising because you don't hear about them much, but the Fabulous Ones. That was Steve Kern
Okay.
and Stan Lane. I'm like, wow, that's a name from way, way back.
Yeah.
Um, because the Fabulous Ones, they pretty much broke up right as Stan Lane was recruited to join the Midnight Express to
Yep.
replace Louis
Yep.
Condrey. And that was
hmm
in what, like 86, 85,
Think
86
so.
ish?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's see, which Starcade was Night of the Skywalkers? Was it 86? Because Condrey was still with them then.
Yeah. I think it was 86.
Okay. Um, so yeah, because 85 was
80.
the I Quit match.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
80, so 86 would have been, yeah, because
hmm
uh Flair defended against Nikita,
That's right. Yeah.
and the scaffold was like, you
Yeah.
know, on top of the ring. Um so yeah, so it had to have been like late 86, early 87 when Stan Lane joined the Midnight Express because he
hmm
he he joined them right before the next Crockett Cup.
Yeah.
So but he also mentioned, and I'm talking about Kyle. Um, he said, Uncle. I have no idea what the word Uncle just came up. Hulk Hogan. See, it's got the oil, in
Yeah.
part of it. But Hulk Hogan was his childhood hero, but he wouldn't go out of his way. I can't blame him. Um,
Yeah. I can't either.
yeah. Ric Flair and Jake the Snake are a few, but I'm not sure um, because of their podcast content. I've never listened to Jake's.
I hadn't
Um,
either, but I understand what he means by flares.
yeah, but yeah, Flair definitely. So we're gonna try to get our own, each of our own like personal top three of people we would like to meet. Um, we just sit down and have a conversation with, and um, so I think this is going to be a pretty good topic,
hmm
and
Yep.
so thanks, Kyle, once again, for giving us ideas, and I have to say, a couple days ago, it was a last minute addition, but it definitely added to it. I was getting ready to record a Cubicle Chat podcast, and I was going to be doing the topic was un in parentheses realism in TV shows and movies,
hmm
and I already had an outline and everything, and Kyle actually he had sent me a suggestion. He had texted it to me, but I told him, I was like, well, I said, I'm literally, I mean, I had Zoom pulled up and everything, getting ready to hit the record button when he texted me. And
Right.
I said, well, I said, I'm getting to record here. Here's a topic. And he's like, oh, he said, I'm driving, but I could join too. I'm like, you know what? It's always
Sure.
better to have, somebody.
Yeah.
And Kyle and I are pretty comfortable, obviously, talking around each other. So, and Kyle's another one that people, well, he's the wrestling guy. No, Kyle knows a lot more than wrestling. Dwaylen
Yeah.
knows a lot more than wrestling. I know a lot more than wrestling. look at all the stupid cubes behind me. So we definitely know a lot more than wrestling. So so he came on there and threw a lot of things I had not thought of, and we had a really good show and stretched what would have been a 30-minute episode tops if it was just me into about an hour and a half.
Okay.
So um, yeah, but it ended up being a pretty good time. So once again, Kyle, thank you. And by the way, while you're checking out Cubicle Chat, what you should really be doing is checking out the Intellectual Rockstar podcast. And what is your latest episode? Because the last one I saw was the Mad Hatter.
That's the last one. I got a little behind with some other stuff we had going on, but the next episode, which I'm gonna do my best to drop that tomorrow, will be on it's a villain named Professor Pig.
See, this is two in a row that I've never heard of. And so I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Professor Pig's a newer one. He's like I don't think he was like introduced in like I think the 2010s. So he was a lot newer villain, but he's got like a creepy backstory, and it's like he's a pretty creepy character anyway. So I figured I'd go. I was talking to Ted because Ted gave me feedback on the Mad Hatter episode, and he said that he's been enjoying all the episodes and learned something new about a Batman villain each time. And I said originally I was just going to do like the main Batman villains, just the ones everybody knew. But then as I got into it, I'm like, well, a lot of the obscure ones or lesser known ones are extremely interesting. So I figure I'm just going to go with all of them until I run out of them.
Ted's always giving me feedback on both our podcast and Cubicle Chat as well. He's
Hmm.
awesome guy, great guy. Go check out The Hill Truth with Ted the Hillbilly Hill. He no longer does social media, but you can email him. I believe it's thehilltruth@gmail.com. And just he really is the podfather because I'd like to know his secret to growing his audience the way he
Oh
has.
yeah, yeah,
Because I mean, and he has great content. That's the first thing,
yeah,
and I like to think our content's great, um, but Ted has really been able to just grow his, and um, that I mean, there's a reason why he's the number one rated show in Antarctica.
exactly.
Award winning, trend setting.
Yeah,
And if you don't think he is, we'll prove that he's not.
yeah.
So, um, uh, want to give another huge shout out to Mike Bink and Inferno from Finisher Wrestling.
Absolutely. That was a
That
great
was
show.
I mean that this past Saturday we had them on, and they've been a big supporter or big supporters of our show, and in turn, we listen to their show as well. Big supporters, great guys, great show, and we were able to make that come together on our show. Now we've already got ideas for their show, and from our show with them, now Waylon and I also have some ideas for this show. Very
Hmm.
very similar to how we started the series of why we are wrestling fans from our appearance on Wrestling with the Truth.
Yep.
BC and J, another shout out to BC and J from Wrestling with the Truth, Wrestling with the War, Wrestling with the 80s. Um, we also refer to them as our friends up north. And
Yeah.
yeah, so we got that idea because we were on their show, and that was kind of the topic is why we are wrestling fans. And I was referring to me and Dwaylen, but I'm like, you know what? That sounds like a series we could do.
Yeah.
And we've been enjoying doing it. Thankfully, we've had, I bet you lost count of how many people. I'd actually have to go back and see how many appearances we've had on our show with that series. And it's something that it's not. I don't think we're going to stop it. We've just kind of ran, not run out of people, but we've gone through so many people one time now. Um,
Yeah.
we just don't have as many to pull from right now, but we do have some in the hopper waiting.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of trying to schedule time because we can work around other people's schedule. In fact, right now, since both Joel and I are both unemployed, so we're actually a lot more flexible than what we were, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it happens, and we're enjoying the fact that right now we're recording literally in the middle of the day on a Thursday.
Yeah. Yep.
So normally I'd be going I'm sitting at my desk going, I hate this. It feels like a jail cell.
Yeah,
You
normally I
know?
would be like, I have 38 minutes before I can clock out.
Yep. But um, but you've got your food truck and you've got other things that you're doing during the day. So,
Yep.
getting that money. And today I actually took my exam to get licensed in the state of Ohio to sell life insurance because of, another side. Right now, it's a side gig, a side hustle. I'm
Hmm.
trying to grow it into more though. Uh, I've actually been part of this for a little over a year, and I was finally able to take the exam. And you have to get a 70 to pass it, and I got a big old fat 72.
There you go.
So,
Oh
and I was telling you before we started recording, that was the hardest test I have ever had to take. Um,
wow.
that was harder than even like some of the promotion tests I took when I was still in the Air Force.
Hmm.
And some of them, like, I have no idea what they're asking, but I'm just going to pick one.
Yeah.
Hope I get it
I'm just
right.
gonna pick one and it'll be all right.
And yeah, but I got a 100 question test and got 72 of them right. And I'm like, whoo. So now I just got a little bit more paperwork to fill out. They already have
Hmm.
my fingerprints, and I'll be licensed to sell insurance. But my next, I was talking with the vice president who I'm under, for the company,
Hmm.
um, and my next thing I'll be taking is for securities.
Okay.
Then after that it'll be Series 6. Then after that it'll be Series 6.3.
Right.
Yep. So and then I'll be able to do investment type stuff.
Hmm.
And then after that it'll be mortgages. So then that after that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once I'm really getting that going, by the way, kind of a side note, um, if anybody does want some like help with personal financial planning, just hit me up and I'll see what we can do. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. So um, when we talk about like people who we'd like to meet, or think or converse with, um, and a lot of it is because the fan fest and things like that. Here's the weird thing for me. I've actually already met, at least one that I had been wanting to meet ever since I was 10 years old.
Yep.
So right now I'm like, I don't know if I want to include him on the list, but then again, I'd like to get him on the podcast. We just gotta, come up with a little bit of
Yeah.
that because he told me how much it cost, and I was like, oh, okay. Um, but he's also, I'm talking about Jimmy the Boogie Boogie Man Valiant, handsome Jimmy Valiant, you know, um, whatever you know him as, and yeah, he's 80 years old,
Hmm.
but I'm pretty sure he's got stories for days. But he said is go $50, brother. I was like, I'll get back with you.
Yeah. It's like
you know,
let me think on
um,
it.
yeah. But I did get my picture made with him, and he signed my figure that you can't see because I've rearranged everything. Which we're ordering a new shelf that I could actually get the belts up on,
Hmm.
so they're not behind, they're not covering up everything. But for those of you not on YouTube, on audio only, yeah, I have the two belts, not two belts, 10 pounds of gold, and then the big gold sitting right behind me, but they're blocking the view of everything else just about. So want to get that shelf, and that way they're kind of high up. They're in the back, but they're high up so you can see them.
Hmm.
So um, but he signed that figure and signed a picture um and so yeah, so I don't know if I want to include him on the list or not though. That's the thing.
I don't know.
So
Probably because you've already met him. Then, I mean, it's one off the
yeah,
bucket
it
list.
it is, but at the same time, can you imagine the stories that he's going to have?
Oh yeah. Especially at 80 years old, he's forgotten more
Yeah,
than.
yeah, and he has his own school. At least I think
Excuse me.
I don't know if his school is still active or not, but I mean he had his own wrestling school for a while, and
Hmm.
um, but we'll start with you. Give me like I guess like your number three or number one. Just give me one of your three that you would like to
Uh,
meet.
I would like to meet Shawn Michaels as my favorite wrestler of all time. I've always liked the fact that he is an average size guy. He's like 6 feet, 6'1", like 230 pounds. I mean, just
I don't even think he's that tall, is he?
he may not be, but just an average guy. And the things he was able to accomplish in the ring at his size. I mean, he was the exception to a Vince McMahon rule of
Mm-hmm.
his main event guys had to be huge, muscular guys, look like bodybuilders in order to be at the top of the card or be the face of the company. And long comes Sean, who comes in, excellent run with the AWA with Marty Jannetty as the Midnight Rockers, two-time AWA World Tag Team Champions. They come in, they do pretty well for themselves, but they never technically win the WWF tag titles. They did at a house show, but the rope broke when they took them from the Hart Foundation.
Right.
So they reversed the decision and gave the titles back to the Hart Foundation, which I always thought was crap because it's like they still won. They won the match. I mean, rope break or
Mm-hmm.
not, they won, but that's as close as they ever got to the tag titles. Um, they did put on some tag team clinics with the Brainbusters on the house show loop when they would do those. Um,
Oh,
but
and the Orient Express. They had some
yes, they had some
man, those
excellent
matches
matches.
put together.
They had a really good match. Six, I think it was WrestleMania 6. They wrestled the Twin Towers, Big Boss Man and Akeem.
I
And
think that was actually
was
five.
it 5? Okay, I couldn't remember if it was 5 or 6.
The reason I was thinking it was six is I think six is the one where they were in a match, but it was like 10 seconds long because they pinned poor Zukov. That was in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that
Okay. Um, but
why they had a tag team match only last that amount of time, which meant
I don't know.
somebody ran over
Yeah.
already.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
and they got cut. But I have been a huge Shawn Michaels fan since '92 when he threw Marty Jannetty through the window on the barbershop.
now we know Marty was trying to run away.
Oh yeah, Marty was trying to run and he just didn't see the window and ran through it.
Yeah,
But I mean, that's on Marty. That's his problem.
yeah. That may
But
explain some of the brain damage decisions he makes now.
right. But you could see the potential in that interview segment and just how he carried himself with the turn. You knew the turn was coming, but he still made you believe that no, I'm just, we're gonna work it out and everything. And then when he hit him with the super kick, it was off to the races. And, you know, over time, yes, backstage there was maturity issues, there was substance abuse issues, and he was a miserable human being to be around outside the ring.
Yeah,
It's been well documented that he was a miserable human being
I mean,
behind the scenes.
don't
He was
sugarcoat it. Don't
yeah,
sugarcoat it. How do you feel?
yeah, he was just
Yeah, yeah,
insufferable.
yeah,
But when he walked through the curtain, he generally gave you the best match on the card.
yeah.
The rarity was there was rare times that what he was going through personally bled into what he did professionally. And the time that I remember best is at SummerSlam when he was defending the title against Vader.
Oh Lord.
And he was acting like my 4-year-old would act when she didn't get her way. And it's expected of a 4-year-old. It's not expected of a grown man. And being a professional wrestler, being the world champion and being face of the company, and he's complaining that Vader wrestled stiff. Who didn't know that Vader wrestled stiff? That's how he made his name. The man
Hmm.
literally got clotheslined so hard, one of his eyeballs popped out, and he stopped long enough to push his eyeball back in and finish the match.
Yep.
He wrestled stiff. Quit complaining and suck it up.
Um,
But
if you learned your craft in Japan, you learned stiff.
stiff, strong style. That's what it's known.
Yes, that's why it's so great.
Exactly. But after that, he killed Vader's main event push. He did use his backstage pull with Vince McMahon to get out of defending the title against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. He was supposed to return the favor to Bret. The knee injury comes up, and he has, he doesn't have the match. Has ends up winning the title and all that stuff. But his in-ring work was amazing. He had a great run, and then '98 hurt his back in the casket match at the Rumble, drops the title to Austin. I've always given him credit. You could tell how much pain that man was in during that match, and he still. Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels have both said that the match was not any good, and I get that because of the limitations of Shawn. I think the match was good based on the limitations of Shawn. He still gave you everything he had, even though he was in just crippling pain. You could see it on his face. Like every time he would hit a move, you could see it was just killing him. But he took his time off. He got clean, you know, turned his life around, became a born again Christian, comes back in 2002. And for my money, his run from 2002 to 2010 was better than the first run because a lot of that backstage stuff was gone. He was giving you even better matches, and he was able to work with other like minded wrestlers, other smaller guys, so to speak, that he could put on great matches with, like Angle. I mean, that match at WrestleMania was amazing. Their trilogy was amazing. Um, you could tell he was in a better place
Yeah.
mentally, physically. You could tell he was, for the first time, he was enjoying his job. He was enjoying what he does. And I would love to meet him simply, one, because he's my favorite, and two, just the stories that he's got to have, especially how, being able to turn his life around and keep it turned around and not go back down that path. Like a lot of wrestlers will get clean, but then they end up going back down that path because they don't stay away from those things that caused that trip in the first
The
place.
situations that will,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
They
know,
put themselves
yep,
right back in the situations that got them in trouble in the first place. So
yep.
Sean is number one, definitely I would love to meet and talk to.
And the wild thing about him and Stone Cold saying that match, they didn't think it was that great.
Hmm.
By the standards of a normal Shawn Michaels Stone Cold match, um, probably not because the expectation levels are so high. But a bad Shawn Michaels Stone Cold match is still better than almost every other match that's out there. So by their
Well,
standards, are saying, well, the match wasn't that great, but it was
yeah,
still just a phenomenal match.
exactly. Like WrestleMania 14 for me is one of the weaker WrestleManias. The only match that I would ever go back and watch is Sean and Steve. I mean,
And, I'm trying to think of the other matches. The tag team battle royal where the Road Warriors came out, dressed in yoga pants.
yeah,
Um,
the dumpster match, which I mean,
yeah,
that is what it is. I mean, that's not a great tag team match. That's just a brawl.
yeah.
Um, what else do you have? 14.
That,
Kane
I
and The
mean,
Undertaker, who have never had a good match together. They have great chemistry, but it's just two big guys punching and kicking each other
yeah.
for 20, 25 minutes.
Two
So
two big guys who can do aerial
who
type
can
moves,
do aerial
but
stuff? And it's like their matches never clicked. As many matches as they've had and as great of chemistry as far as building the story and the promos and everything. They had great chemistry together. But once the bell rang, if they were now tag team, excellent tag
yes,
team. But opponents, I never enjoyed any of their one-on-one matches.
that's also where Kane he dropped a tombstone on Pete Rose for the first time.
Yes. And then it took Undertaker 3 tombstones to beat him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so because that's those reasons. Um,
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, a bad Austin Michaels match is still going to be better than 90% of what's on the card that they're on.
Yep. So, um, and some of mine, and I really had to put some serious thought into this because, um, I'm like, who would I want to just sit down and like really, really hear their stories? Um, because they've been around a while. The first one, but I'll say the first two may be kind of surprising. First one, Abdullah the Butcher,
Okay.
because he is also like in his 80s,
Hmm.
and he has been around a long time.
I
You
would
know,
love to know what inspired him to go the style that he went.
right? Because I mean, they ECW might as well just rename themselves. The Abdullah the Butcher Wrestling Federation.
Yeah, yeah.
But he was doing it 30 years before.
Before, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I remember seeing like in the old magazines because I told the story about how a kid I knew in school back in middle school back in North Carolina, his brother had a ton of old magazines and they're spanning from like 72 to 74, and Abdul the Butcher was in those
Yeah.
and doing the same stuff. I mean, he's not as big, but he was kind of a fat guy back then too.
Yeah.
And but pulling the fork, they would say he's got a fork, even though it was a fork wrapped up in tape, but it was actually a because he would hit them and it wasn't breaking,
Hmm.
so that thing was not plastic,
Oh no.
but he would hit
Yeah.
people in their and and the stories that he's had because he's been featured on Dark Side of the Ring. He was on at least the episode where they talked about Bruiser Brody getting killed, and he's been kind of an influence when it comes to like the brawling style of wrestling.
Oh yeah. He's like ECW took what Abdullah and honestly what Abdullah and Bruiser Brody did,
Hmm.
and they literally were like, okay, they laid the blueprint. Now let's set it on fire and see how far we can go.
Yeah, and
And they literally set stuff on fire.
no, they
Because
did.
poor Spike Dudley got power bombed through flaming tables. I can't count how many times. So
And as he's flying through the air, all 120 pounds of him, he's like going, "I have a teaching degree. What am I doing?"
what am I doing? And then he's on fire. So
And
yeah,
then he's on fire. A little fire because it's Spike Dudley.
yeah.
Um, but yeah. So can you imagine though those stories that somebody like an Abdullah would have?
Oh yeah. It
And
would be yeah.
the shoot interviews I've seen with him, he doesn't talk bad about any other wrestlers.
Hmm.
He's not one. You're not going to get dirt out of him. You're going to get stories, but you're not going to get dirt. Um,
Right.
and he has nothing but good to say about like every wrestler. So they're
Hmm.
like, well, which wrestlers nowadays would you want to? And I've actually seen some interviews. And he's like, all of them. He said, he said they're all good. He said if they're good enough to be in the ring. He said, yes, I would love to have a match with them.
Hmm.
And which is amazing, just hearing him talk because he was the madman from Sudan,
Yeah.
and then you trying to find out, no, he's from. I think he might be from Nova Scotia. Hold on. So, but his real name is Larry, and
Yeah.
he's from Canada, and of course, last I knew, he made his residence in Atlanta, where he had Abdul the Butcher's house of ribs and Chinese,
Okay.
and
Okay.
yeah, and but unfortunately, he also had to shut the restaurants down because it came out that he has Hep C,
Hmm.
um, which is very unfortunate. And of course, when you find out, and he didn't tell anybody, Windsor. Okay, so I don't know. I was thinking he was from Nova Scotia. I mean,
Windsor, Ontario.
yep, he's 82 years old.
Okay.
Um, 6 foot, 360 pounds. That's what he's billed as. By the way, Shawn Michaels is billed as being 6'1".
Hmm.
But they were saying his actual height is probably around 5'9" or 5'10".
Probably.
So
Yeah.
um, yeah, his name is Lawrence Robert Shreve.
Okay.
But just if to hear the stories that he would have talking about, like Puerto Rico and then Japan and
Hmm.
then all over both the United States and Canada, and he would actually have some stories and probably a lot of wisdom to pass on because
Oh yeah,
you know he wasn't one that they ever really talked. He could tell you about the psychology of being a heel because I can't think of any time where he was a face unless he was
yeah,
facing somebody like a Bruiser Brody. And
yeah, yep.
but yeah, so yeah, that's my first pick is Abby.
Okay.
So
Let's see. My second pick is Samoa Joe.
okay,
I've been a fan of Samoa Joe since I first saw him in Ring of Honor back in late 2002. Uh, I was instantly amazed that a guy that size, you know, Samoa Joe is built like a tank and
yeah,
moves like, and in his prime, moved like Rey Mysterio.
yeah,
No man that's 280 pounds should be able to do the things that he was able to do in the ring. And, when he went to TNA, he was the X Division champion, and it fit perfectly because their motto for the X Division was that there's no limits. And he was a perfect example of that. 6 feet tall, 285 pounds, and he's doing tope suicidas and just
yeah.
the in ring skill. I mean, when he would say, "My name is Samoa Joe and I am professional wrestling," he is to this day. I mean, he's slowed down some. He's older. He's not doing the tope suicidas and all that. He's just changed his style, but he is a monster, whether he is heel or face. And his ability to talk people into the building is still, in my opinion, he is still the best talker in pro wrestling right now. I mean, MJF is the only one that I would put maybe slightly above Samoa Joe as far as the promo goes. But MJF's promo style is completely different. A lot of his is more, let me see how insensitive I can be and get away with, while Samoa Joe's is just, it's realism. It's like you believe everything that's coming out of his mouth because you look at him and the way he carries himself to the ring and the way he articulates himself, and it's like you believe that he is as good as he says he is. And I've seen him in interviews, like not wrestling promos, but like interviews, and he's just, he seems like a real genuine human being, and he seems like a lot of fun to be around and really humble. So I would really love to talk to him and just hear stories of him coming up, because you got to think he's been doing this at
Long
least
time.
21 years. Ring of Honor started in
Wow.
2002. He
Oh,
was
I can see
wrestling
it.
before that, so he's probably been doing this at least 25 years.
Wow, I never thought about that.
Yeah, and
Samoa Joe
still
being
to this
around that
day
long.
winning championships. He's still the reigning Ring of Honor television champion. So, and he's back, helping the younger generation back where it all started for him, where he really made a name for himself. He's still the longest reigning Ring of Honor world champion ever. In one single reign, he held it for over 600 days.
And I don't remember which year it was, if it was 17, 18, or 19. One of those, the 2K game, WWE 2K, whatever.
Hmm.
When you created a wrestler, you had to start in NXT and you had to wrestle like a tryout match, kind of sort of with Samoa Joe.
Hmm.
I mean, and so that sets something. They're like, okay,
Oh
Samoa
yeah,
Joe,
yeah,
that's the one that you would have to, in real life, actually try to have a match with.
yeah.
You know,
Well, you can tell how much faith all these companies put in Samoa Joe. Like when he went to NXT, he's the only three-time NXT champion.
yeah.
Him and Nakamura have both held it twice, but he won it a third time when he beat Karrion Cross. He's the only three-time, you know, he's the only three-time NXT champion. He's a Grand Slam champion in TNA. He's won, he's won everything there is to win in Ring of Honor now, because he's been the world champion, the pure champion, tag champion, and now he's the TV champion.
And he should have been. WWE champion.
Oh, he absolutely should have been WWE. He should have been the one to take that belt off AJ Styles.
Yep. Or Lesnar. You
Yeah,
know,
or Lesnar. Honestly, he should have taken they should have had him at Great Balls of Fire, mow through Brock Lesnar, and take the Universal title. He was so hot, and the fans were so into
yes.
him winning, but yet Vince is like, no, we got to keep Lesnar on top.
I like Lesnar. Ha ha. You
Yeah,
know, look at
but
that. What a maneuver.
Samoa Joe's definitely my number two.
My number two, another one that I don't even think we've ever really mentioned this guy. But as far as like somebody who understands like how the stories work and how psychology works and how the characters work, and he's been both a face and a heel. That's Dutch Mantel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
he
Zeb
could.
Coulter, Uncle
Yep.
Zebekiah. Yeah. He's
Can
had
you?
he's
He could teach like a wrestling class at a university.
absolutely. I
You
mean,
know.
one of the greatest wrestling minds ever that I feel like is very underrated
Hmm.
as far as I mean, he was a good wrestler for the style of wrestling that he
Right.
did, but you know, for me, it was just the creative part that he was so good at. And I feel like that part has never truly been utilized well by any company he's ever worked for. I don't feel like that they had this genius, you know, on the books and just never took advantage of it like they should have.
And even if you didn't have him as like the head booker, he's going to be the person to be your advisor to go, hey, Dutch, what do you think? And he'll be
Let
honest with you.
Put him in charge of the writing staff. You
Yes.
know how much better, especially the 2010s WWE. Do you know how much better that product would have been if somebody like Dutch Mantel was writing the product and not these TV writers that were writing episodes of Raw like they were writing episodes of Friends?
Yeah. And, yeah, they had him in front of the camera, not likable characters. There wasn't characters
No.
people could get behind. I mean, it was, even as a manager, which he could have been a good manager,
Oh yeah,
but they always had it at like mid card at best, middle mid card at best,
yeah,
not even top
yeah.
of the mid card. And but when you see him in interviews and you see the interviews with other wrestlers talking about him, they always talk about how um, he seems to know just about everything there is to know about the business, especially
Mm-hmm.
like behind the scenes.
Yep.
And he knows how characters work. He knows how the psychology works. He was the one who told Steve Austin in, I think they may have been still in Texas, they may have been in Memphis by this point, but he told Steve Austin after a match he said, sit down in this chair. He grabbed a chair, told him, sit
Mm-hmm.
down. You watch every single match that you're not in.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that's how you learn. And, and so Steve Austin has always given him credit for a lot of things. He
Mm-hmm.
said, if Dutch hadn't have done that, who knows? I mean, he said
Exactly.
he said it's little things like when they get him in a headlock, if you notice, they always have them way up
Mm-hmm.
kind of higher with their head, like right here. Whereas if we were like in a real fight, we always get them in a headlock and you always have them down and then you punch them
Mm-hmm.
several times. But he said in there, you have them up so you could still talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. And, but it's things like that, the little things that Dutch Mantel would know. And you could sit there and once again, he's been there, done that, been all over the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Yep.
And he would have so many stories. You could he would be just an open book of knowledge,
Mm-hmm. I
So
agree.
yeah, that's why he's another one. As far as like sitting down and talking to and just picking their brain,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, yeah, and that's what I say. I mean, it took me a little bit of thought to come up, so far with Abdullah and now Dutch, but it was like the people, and I will throw another one out there. I've already met him, and he's not a wrestler, but Bill After would be one
Oh
that I
yeah,
would.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so if we're going to do an honorable mention, I'll just throw that one out, just real
Mm-hmm.
quick. Bill After is definitely one just from the 15-minute conversation I had with him already. I was like, I could talk to this man all
Right.
day. So, but your third, and if you want to do some honorable mentions as well.
Actually, I don't really have any honorable mentions. I take that back. I do have an honorable mention. He's not a wrestler. Paul Heyman. I
Oh,
would love
yeah.
to talk to Paul Heyman. Just, about the original ECW, his promo style, just another genius wrestling mind. There's so much that he could, there's so much that he could tell you about the business that would probably blow your mind. And I would love to talk. I would love to have that conversation with Paul Heyman. So that he would
Wow.
be definitely
Whew.
my honorable mention. But my third is Arn Anderson.
That's
Arn
another one I thought
is
about. Yep.
Arn, in my opinion, is still he's neck and neck with Scott Hall, but to me, Arn is still the greatest professional wrestler to never be a world champion in any promotion he's ever worked for because he had everything. Arn had he had a look that said, he didn't look like a big bodybuilder like the Road
Mhm.
Warriors or anything like that. He looked like an everyday guy that was capable of beating the crap out of you. He just looked, he looked like a normal dude. You could, compare or whatever. Um, you could relate to it.
Yep.
And his in-ring skills were just phenomenal. The focusing on a body part, which I still feel like is a lost art in some companies in pro wrestling. Um, but Arn would focus on the body part because he said his the way he learned and his philosophy is a three-legged chair is no good to anybody. He's like, so if I
Exactly.
wear out an arm or I wear out a leg, then what good are they after I get done with it? And he just and his promos are still some of the best promos. I go back on YouTube frequently and just pull up Arn Anderson promos and listen to them. And it's like Dusty said on the Four Horsemen DVD thing, he said that you've got Flair and Tully and JJ talking about, Space Mountain and cars and women and watches and Lear jets and all this stuff. And then Arn is just, and I know we're family friendly, but this is a quote from Dusty Rhodes. He said Arn would just stop and look in the camera and be like, I'm going to kick your ass.
Hmm.
And Dusty said, and you always believed. When Arn said he was going to do it, you always believed he was going to do it. And he's like, Arn would always bring everything back around to what the focal point is supposed to be, and that's pro wrestling. And Arn always said, he's like, I'm not, he's like, you don't see flashy trunks. You don't see, in-ring music. You don't see pyro. He's like, it's black, black trunks and boots. He's like, but it says wrestling on the marquee. And that's what I do best is wrestling.
But Arn
And
Arn was real.
Arn was real. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's Samoa Joe gives me that Arn Anderson
Yeah.
type
Samoa Joe,
type
I can
vibe.
believe,
Yeah, you
he's
believe it.
going to
And
beat
with
somebody
Arn,
else.
you believed it. And I mean, this is the man who created the name for the Horsemen.
Hmm.
You know, he came up with this group, you know, and it was by accident, but he struck gold with it. And without Arn, without Arn Anderson, there's no Horsemen. As
Exactly.
great as great as the individual wrestlers are, Ric Flair, I know, greatest world champion ever. Tully Blanchard should have been a world champion.
Hmm.
Ole Anderson, one of the toughest men in the history of pro wrestling. Barry Windham, one of the best athletes to ever walk into pro wrestling. But none of that works without Arn. Arn was the glue that created that group and held it together. And
And
I and Arn has forgotten more about pro wrestling than I think anybody will ever learn. Arn's already forgotten so
um,
much, you know.
out of all of the Conrad Thompson podcasts, but that's actually got what got me really started listening to all the wrestling podcasts, and then what
Hmm.
the inspired me to say, "Hey, maybe I should have a wrestling podcast."
Hmm.
you know, The only one I actually still listen to now is Arn Anderson.
It's orange. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's nothing against the other ones. It's just, when uh, there were so many of them, they
Hmm.
added so many of them, and a lot of them started becoming very repetitive.
Yeah, and there's like no
Um,
time. It gets to where there's not. You've got to pick and choose because there's only so many hours in the day, and you can't listen to them all. You just can't. So you've got to
yeah,
narrow it down.
and I also started listening to non wrestling podcasts because that was actually
Hmm.
when we started doing the podcast.
Hmm.
Which, by the way, I just want to throw something else out there. Tomorrow will be the third anniversary of Armchair Booking.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's
Um, I
crazy.
I looked on that the other day. I saw the date and I was like, huh, that's Friday. So um, once again, shout out to Kyle, for
Hmm.
helping me through that the first year until basically he was hitting the point where he had a lot he was doing.
He had a lot going
So
on. Yeah.
yep, he still has a lot going on. Um, but now after the third year, well, I wanted to make sure I wasn't accidentally bleeding over from what they were talking about onto this project
Hmm.
because it would
Right.
look, you know, um, like almost not plagiarism. Sometimes it would just be a coincidence. But either way, I'm like,
Hmm.
well, let me get away from that.
Yeah.
And but Arns is the only one I still listen to because you listen to Arns' vocabulary. I mean, that's how he came up with
Oh
the
yeah.
Four Horsemen. I mean,
Yeah.
he did that quick. He had like 15 seconds to say something.
Yeah.
Last time you saw something like this with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse,
Yeah.
and and if you listen to him, and you realize that Arn is very well read. And by the way,
Hmm.
he didn't have a great upbringing.
No.
He was raised by his grandparents, um, and because his mom was fairly young, like maybe 17, I
Mm.
think, when she had him, maybe 18, but she was fairly young, was not ready. Um,
Right.
but and that's why her parents said, no, we are going to raise the baby.
Hmm.
You'll be here. In fact, she lived like just a house just
Yeah.
up the dirt road they were on. Um, but he said, of course, we've seen this a lot, unfortunately. Mom was kind of a partier,
Hmm.
had multiple boyfriends. In fact, Arn
Hmm.
apparently beat one of her boyfriends up one time because the guy slapped his mom. And so Arn didn't matter,
Yeah.
Arn, was like 14, 15 years old and was already,
Yeah.
he was a football player and all that. And he beat the guy up pretty bad. And, but I mean, he made sure that whatever he put his mind to, um, he did it right. He studied, he played football and, other sports. And he said, his granddad cut hair for a living. He was a barber.
Yeah.
Not me kind of barber, not last name, but he was a barber, and barbers usually don't make a lot of money. You
Yeah.
know, maybe if you own the shop, you may make some, but I mean, he said so. It was they were definitely not affluent because he's like he would be at a store and he want to get something from the store, and he said Granny would tell me no, um, Marty, his real name is Marty
Hmm.
Martin. No, we can't afford that, and so she kept him humble also because the first time he got a car of his own, he went out and got a brand new convertible Cadillac, and he brought it to her house. Look, Granny, and she said, "Take it back." So, um, but for Arn, yeah, those kind of conversations. Because if you listen to his podcast, I mean, he talks a lot about the wrestler, but he talks also about like the psychology behind why they were doing certain things. And then
Yep.
he admits some things. He's like, I don't remember why we did that. I don't
Yeah.
think that I'd have to actually ask somebody else as to why I was wrestling that person. He's like,
Yeah.
it would have to have been a couple, and he would go through these scenarios what it probably was, but but he's again, like you were saying about some of the other ones, he's probably forgotten
Oh
more
yeah.
than what we'll ever know. So um, and I think one person that might be able to beat Arn's vocabulary is maybe Matt Mims, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so we got to get him back on the show again. But I'm gonna have to have a dictionary on standby just so I could every time he says something I don't know, I'm going to go, Hold on, go look it
Uh,
up.
Shout out to Matthew Mims. He looks like he's doing some big things in the NWA in the tag division. So
Yes, sir.
props to him.
Um, and you know, in Matt Mims, when he walks in a room, I mean, he is just jacked because I mean,
Yeah.
he puts up some serious weight. You know,
Hmm.
he's got a mean look, and then you talk to him, he's soft
Yeah.
spoken,
One of the
and
nicest guys. Yeah.
and they were apparently refer to him as the walking thesaurus, and
Hmm.
I'm like, I can see that.
Yeah.
You know, we've had him on the show twice, and both times were great interviews. You know, we
Hmm.
had him by himself. Then we had him on the panel show last year, and you know, I'm just listening to him going, man, how many words does this man know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, he's not just throwing them up just to say, hey, look what I know. I mean, it's part of his normal conversations,
Hmm.
which means why isn't he like teaching somewhere as a professor?
Yeah.
You know, um, but speaking of panels, and you know, you brought up, you know, Paul Heyman being part of your honorable mention. Can you imagine sitting on at a table? You know, they do like the table for three, table for four. They do
Hmm.
these shows like this, but Paul Heyman, Dutch Mantel, Rip Rogers, and Jim Cornette.
It's a learning tree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally the learning tree. You've literally got the best minds ever in pro
Hmm.
wrestling. No disrespect to anybody else because there's been a lot of excellent wrestling minds, but those four together at one time, there's no need to talk. You just sit and listen and learn.
And you know, Rip Rogers, I know that's not a name we really talk about a lot, but he actually has his own YouTube thing now. He just started not too long ago.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. In fact, I get notifications for it, but I just it's because he goes live. I want to say every day,
Oh, wow.
and he like something he's um Mick Foley's actually talked about him. I know in at least his first book,
Hmm.
and he said Rip Rogers. He's one of those that doesn't get as much due as what he um
Yeah.
he deserves. Um, he said because he's a little out there, and he tells a story about apparently Barry Windham dropped a Rolex in the toilet, a toilet that was full of the
Hmm.
diarrhea that you know that Barry Windham had dropped in there from his escapades the night before from all the Jack
Hmm.
Daniels or whatever. Dropped his Rolex in it. Of course, now he doesn't want to flush because,
Hmm.
well, Rolex gone. And they're like, what are we going to do? He said, Rip Rogers said, hold on, rolled up his sleeve, barehanded, reached in there, eh, searched around until he found the Rolex, and here you go. And they're like, okay,
You're disgusting.
you're disgusting. So thank you, but yeah, you're
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, so not the most I guess sane.
Hmm.
Rip Rogers also used to be a teacher. He's another one.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, he used to be a teacher like in Indianapolis, somewhere like that. But Foley actually said Rip Rogers though had he was one who could really explain things. Um, because he said he used to go to Rip Rogers for advice all the time because one
Hmm.
of the things it was he was about to leave WCW. This was in I think his second run through WCW. And well, he was doing like a loser leaves town match against Kevin Sullivan.
Right. That's after they lost the tag titles and started
Right.
feuding. Yep.
And he said, he was asking Rip Rogers about it, and he said, well, Kevin Sullivan's supposed to be the face. And Rip said, no.
No.
He said, Kevin Sullivan is the least sympathetic character in wrestling. There's no way, after all he said, no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to turn him face.
No. Not
And
after
so
the stuff that, not after just the stuff he's done in pro wrestling. There's no way you can make him a sympathetic babyface. You
you
can't.
can't. And so and Rip Rogers was explaining to Mick about a couple of things that you should do, and he said, and of course, he went out there, and the people were not going to boo. They were not going to cheer Kevin Sullivan, so by default, they were cheering for Mick
Hmm.
Foley. When he was still going under Cactus Jack, but yeah, Rip Rogers, he was helping train down at OVW. I don't know if he still is or not. He might be. I think Al Stowe was also down there. Um, Now, Rip Rogers, I've heard him on Cornette's show. This was years ago. Um, if we were to ever get him on the show, which I think would be really cool,
Hmm.
we would have to really stress to him, all right, this is a family friendly show. So
Yeah, and I don't think
oh
he'd be able to help himself. I just
yeah,
don't. I
because
think
he,
he's so
oh,
used to being able to say any and everything that he
every,
wants.
every
I
sentence
don't.
was GDF, GDF, GD. It's like,
Yeah,
dude, even Cornette was like, dude.
yeah, and it's like I don't think he would be able to stay in those confines.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, where he may have been on Cornette's, he may have just been doing it just for the shock value. But
Yeah,
so
it
many
could
times the
be.
shock
Yeah.
value is gone.
Well, no, because I've seen him on Twitter, and it's the same thing.
Same thing. Uh, um, but yeah, um, so yeah, I already said my honorable mention would be Bill Apter, and that's just because I have met him and had a short
Hmm.
conversation. And if we could ever get him on the show, we would have to do not even like a two-part. It'd have to be like a three or four-parter.
Hmm.
We would
Yeah.
just have to split it up because another wrestling mind, but from a journalist
Yeah.
uh, point of view. But my number three um, is the Undertaker.
There you go. Yep. That's a good
So
one.
yeah, and because he could tell, um, like to hear how he started, and all the gimmicks that he went through and
Yep.
misused by WCW, but then brought in this gimmick of the Undertaker, but then how he's taken the Undertaker
Hmm.
and evolved it and was able to.
Well, well, even discussing his time in Memphis, because people tend to forget that he is a former unified world heavyweight champion when that title was the world championship for the USWA, that
Mhm.
particular territory. And he's a former world champion of that territory. And then should have been the United States champion in WCW because he should have beat Lex Luger. Um, because he was hot when he was feuding with Luger. It would have been the perfect time to put the title on an up and coming star. But yeah, they didn't know what to do with him. They didn't realize what they had. And now he's one of the greatest characters in the history of pro wrestling. And not just character, he's one of the best wrestlers because, like you said, the evolution of The Undertaker went from the spooky, almost zombie
Yeah,
type character to where he was plotting and methodical and, everything was like a horror movie character. He was like Michael Myers come to life. And then, it just kept evolving. And then we get the American Badass stage where it was basically just Mark Calloway with the volume turned up. And then we got the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker.
yep. Which is the
One
one I don't think he would ever go back to doing that
No, I don't
because
either. That's the one I
yeah,
always called Satan Taker. Is what I
that's
always called
about,
it.
but yeah,
And
yeah,
but then he went back to the Dead Man, but tweaked it also, and the Dead Man became this excellent technician in the ring. I mean, you know, when he's hanging toe to toe with the Kurt Angles and Shawn Michaels of pro wrestling,
hmm,
that tells you how much work he's put in to evolve over time. It's kind of like when Michael Jordan got older and perfected the jump shot that nobody could touch because
yeah.
he knew I'm getting older and I can't dunk from the free throw line like I used to be able to, but I can hit this 21-foot jump shot that nobody's going to be able to stop.
That turnaround fadeaway Jordan had.
That
Yeah,
fadeaway jumper was just it was beautiful and untouchable. And the Undertaker did that. It's like I'm getting older and I can't do these things as much, so I'm just going to up my mat wrestling game and show people another side.
because
And that would be amazing to talk to him and see what his thought process would be with the evolution over time of 30 years of the Undertaker.
and think about this, not just when with the evolution going from okay, we have spooky pants, the zombie,
Yeah, Yeah.
And then you had the Underfaker, but he
Yeah.
came in, changed his glove color from gray to purple,
Yep.
you know, um, but his move set was still more or less the same. But then later on, he was developed. Okay, I got the tombstone. Oh, now I got this massive choke slam because he is a
Yeah.
legit 6'10".
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that choke slam looks like
Yeah.
if I were to do a choke slam to somebody, they go so,
Yeah.
but he does it,
Yeah.
it's like bam.
And I mean, he's walking the top rope and he's
Yeah.
just doing,
Yep.
suicide dives over the top. And, you got a
Hmm.
6'10", 300-pound dude flying through the air at you. And it's like, yeah, he just kept changing it up. He kept changing with the times, which is very important.
And then of course, he comes up with his version of a power bomb, the last ride, where he has
Yes.
them up and then he picks them
And
up even
then,
higher
yep, the
and then
elevated
bam.
power bomb. Yeah. And
And then
then,
his chokehold. Um,
yeah,
what's it called? Hell's Gates.
Hell's Gates. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that, you could tell his MMA influences. You could tell he took some of that from him being a fan of MMA because, he used that. He used the guillotine choke.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a guillotine.
even
That's right.
yeah, even the gloves that he used, he changed up his look and was looked more like a fighter
Hmm.
as time went on, and not just the spooky horror movie character. He looked like a legit fighter.
And then he also had other moves that weren't necessarily finishing moves. He had it was the combination snake eyes, but then as he's dropping him on the turnbuckle in the corner, he's hitting the other ropes and he's coming back and he's hitting them with a kick right in the face.
Oh, that big boot, yeah, it was
Yeah,
amazing. I always love that. Yeah.
yeah. And his lariat was one of the ones. Him and Barry Windham had the best lariats out
Yeah. Yeah.
there. And
Because I mean,
he,
they put their entire body into it. They literally flew through the air when they hit it.
yes.
They left their feet when they hit that lariat.
Best example of the Undertaker's lariat is, and we did a watch along of this last time we did a watch along before,
Hmm.
WWE Network had it to where you can't do watch alongs on
Yeah.
Zoom. With this one we did with our friend Alan watching it
Hmm.
was Undertaker against Hogan when he beat Hogan for the title at Survivor Series in '91. There was one part where Hogan, was doing the shoulder block. Well, Undertaker came off the shoulder block, bounced off the ropes, and immediately took like a step and was in the air
Yeah.
as Hogan's come to the ropes, and bam, he hit that
Yeah.
lariat,
Yep.
and you're like, oh, this is over,
Oh yeah.
you know.
And
And
I mean, the Undertaker went from the Monster Slayer, like when the streak first started, they threw every big guy at him. You know, he beat Jimmy Snuka, and then it started to where he was just the monster killer, and it's like we're going to throw every big monster at him. But then it got to where, oh, Undertaker's in a match with Rey Mysterio. Undertaker's in a match with Edge. He's having this trilogy with Triple H. He's having these, 5-star classics with Shawn Michaels, and he proved that he was more than just the character.
yeah, um, hey, Undertaker just chucked Mick Foley off the top of the Hell in a Cell,
Yeah, just threw him off the
um,
cell. He wrestled that match with a broken foot.
with a broken foot.
Yeah,
I mean, when I get a break, when I've broken anything, I just lay down and cry.
yeah. It's
And
like,
no,
oh,
oh
and
no,
he's throwing people off the top of a 16-foot structure.
yeah,
Then he's dropping down out of that structure into the ring on the broken foot
on
because
the
you could
broken,
see when he
yeah,
landed,
he's
he
like,
was like shaking it off, and it's like, you know, and yeah, injuries kind of slowed him down. So another reason why he changed up his style,
mm-hmm.
but he's just the greatest character in the history of wrestling and one of the best wrestlers.
And just to sit down and talk with, um, really, it'd be Mark Calloway, the man,
Hmm. Yep.
about all the things he's seen because he's another one. He's traveled around the world.
Oh yeah, he's traveled the
Um,
world. Yeah.
yeah, he was there on the television show in Kuwait when Vader got a little carried away.
Yeah.
The Undertaker was also the one he kept order in the locker room.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's and that included going to Vince McMahon, going, you better go apologize to Bret Hart right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course then Bret punched Vince in the face. But
Yeah.
but Undertaker was one. He told Vince, the owner, the boss, you better get in there and you better apologize to him. He said, you got some explaining to do.
I mean, rumor still has it that he was the one who made sure Shawn dropped the title to Austin because Shawn didn't want to do it, and Taker's sitting back there taping his hands up, in gorilla position, and it's
How's it going,
like
Shawn?
we can hand you can do business the right way, or we can handle it another way. But
Yeah.
if you walk back through that curtain, then you better make the right decision before you come back through the curtain.
And if people don't think things like that happen, and if they don't think things like that happen to Shawn Michaels,
They absolutely
Ron and
did.
Don Harris
Mm-hmm.
actually they beat Shawn Michaels to within an inch of his life at one point,
Mm-hmm.
like in the
Yep.
shower, because of some shenanigans he had pulled.
Yep.
You know, and then they probably went out and had a beer together, but
Oh, I'm sure.
they just got their
But
point across.
yep. Mm-hmm.
If you hear that, that is my phone ringing. I'm actually going to have to tell him I'm recording right now. That is my dad calling. That is a ringtone I have from my dad. So, could you hear it?
No, I heard a little bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Everclear, a father of mine.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how you never call, so you don't have your own ringtone. I don't think you've ever called
Right.
me actually. So
No,
I
I
need to
don't
get.
think so. I'm just not a big caller. I'll text you. I'll text you all day, but I just not a fan of talking on the phone.
I am going to tell him that recording right now. I will call you when I am done. Um, but anyway, so yeah, the Undertaker, just because once again, I mean, and my criteria was, imagine the stories they can tell. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's kind of like and I stole that kind of from remember the TV show Night Court.
Yes. Yes.
Remember Bull, the one big bailiff.
Mm-hmm.
He found out somebody they were like in a distributing company which distributed pork rinds,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "Pork rinds, gee, the stories you must have."
Yeah.
So that's one of them really funny, just off the wall lines you always remember.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, yeah, imagine the stories these guys had.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be Shawn Michaels, Samoa Joe, who was your third?
Arn.
Arn, Duh. Um, that was that because Arn was almost on my list too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or if it is like Abdul the Butcher, you know, Dutch Mantel, The Undertaker. I mean, imagine all of
Yeah.
them, and then the other ones we mentioned who didn't make our top three, but and sometimes I think with like a Paul Heyman or a Cornette, Rip Rogers, and all them, we wouldn't even be talking. We would
No.
just
Oh
be
no.
sitting
We
there
would just be
listening.
listening. Yeah.
And so those guys, I think Rip Rogers could actually have his own course at a college somewhere, a university,
Oh
and
yeah.
it'd be
Definitely.
something like, not even like, okay, here's Wrestling 101, here's Wrestling 102, here's Wrestling
Mm-hmm.
103, because he could take it that far.
Mm-hmm.
But those are our lists. For anybody out there listening, send us your list. Hit us up.
Yes.
Yeah, let us know your list of the top three. We will say all the ones we mentioned. If you notice, they're all actually living, because
Mm-hmm.
Iron Sheik would have been one I would have
Oh yeah.
loved to talk to, but unfortunately, he did pass away, and that's actually what prompted Kyle to send us a question, which turned into a topic. But and there's some other ones, and I will have to admit, uh, Jake Roberts, because you don't know what he's going to say. Um,
Yeah.
Ric Flair, I don't know. I don't want to hear his stories of partying all the time. If he would just stick to
No, I don't want to
wrestling,
hear. I want to hear about wrestling. I don't want to hear about the womanizing and the partying. I don't. I mean,
right,
I just don't care. I mean,
right,
you're you're in your 70s. Why is that what you're still holding on to
right.
when you've done all of this exceptional stuff in your professional career, but it's the womanizing and partying that you're grasping onto.
Yeah, because maybe your three kids and your grandkids,
Don't want to
maybe
hear about it.
they don't want to hear about it because that's what
Yeah.
you made a priority.
Yeah.
Rather hear about the wrestling. And but yeah, send us your three. So we'd love to hear them. armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you've probably seen the marquee come across. You can always hit us up on Facebook. You can always hit us up on Twitter @Booking Armchair. You can hit us up on Instagram. You can hit Dwaylen up, the intellectual rock star. Hit him up at fat_daddy73 on Twitter or at the rockstar73.
Yep.
Yep. So, and hit me up at cubicle_chat on Twitter. Hit us up on all those. Let us know your top three. We would love to hear them. Support your other wrestling podcasts. Like I said, we mentioned having finished your wrestling. We mentioned Ted the Hillbilly Hill. We've mentioned Wrestling with the Truth. Also got to mention the Dad World Order. That's another one that those guys are just great. I want to mention TNC Sports Talk. Haven't talked about Justin in a while because he's still doing stuff. He's got a lot of other stuff going on right now too, but he's still putting out a product, whenever he can. And definitely want to mention the Northern Wrestling Federation, including Wildcat Chris Harris. He's on the shirt.
Yep.
In fact, you know what? I haven't done a selfie with the shirt in a while, so let me do that now, and I have to put that. Yep, recording. Picture the new shirt with Wildcat. He was just on Conrad Thompson's show, by the way. Conrad Thompson actually did an interview with Wildcat. And I want to say, and you know what, Conrad? He was on our show first, twice. So, but I actually commented on the Twitter, which Conrad actually posted that. I was like, yeah, we've had him on our show, great interview, and even a greater person. Because Chris Harris, yeah, he's just a phenomenally great person. He's always supported us, and so we obviously would support him because he's another one that he's been there, done that. So he could tell you some stories of redemption too. So but just a great dude. Now I'm friends with him and his wife Shannon. So but yeah, send us your thoughts, send us your ideas, send us your three people that you want to meet and have a conversation with. Maybe you just want to meet them, maybe you just want to talk to them, maybe you want to hear their stories. So, but anything else, Waylon? I do want to give congratulations to the Denver Nuggets, congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that's what they're called. The NBA champions and the Stanley Cup champions. Especially the Denver Nuggets. Oh my God, that dude, what's his name?
I don't know how to pronounce it, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he was the MVP. Yeah, he was amazing. And I was hoping Jimmy Butler would win a championship because he's such a good player. But I love the fact that the Denver Nuggets got their first championship in franchise history.
Yep. And yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights. And the fact that LeBron surrounds himself with quote unquote great players, couldn't get it done.
Can't get the job done.
Got swept again.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan never even made it to a game 7.
No.
The final. LeBron got swept before he even made the finals. And that's even if they even a couple years, Lakers weren't even making the playoffs a couple years ago. It was with LeBron, And here comes the Nuggets playing as a team.
Yeah, exactly. Playing as a team, no huge egos, no let's build this super team so we can have an easier path to the championship. They just played team basketball and dug in and took it all. That's how it should be. Building these super teams generally does more harm than good.
And last year, the Milwaukee Bucks, and I don't even keep up with the NBA much anymore. I haven't since they went on strike in '98.
Yeah.
No, I don't even keep up, but I know the Milwaukee Bucks.
From
what I hear, same thing. They built a team.
Yeah.
They played as a team.
And they struggled for years until they got the whole team was able to gel and play good together. But they didn't go out and waste money signing all these supposed huge stars. Golden State's the same way. They just, they built their team with basically homegrown talent and they just started winning because they got good.
Yep. So, but yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to the Denver Nuggets, give a shout out to the Vegas Golden Knights. This is apparently their second Stanley Cup. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you a lot about hockey, but I do know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah.
I don't understand all the rules of hockey. So I just know it can get kind of brutal. There could be fights, and I'm like, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
So um, BC, I know it's actually not the national pastime in Canada, believe it or not.
Hmm.
The number one sport is actually not hockey, but we think hockey, we think Canada.
Hmm.
We just do. So, so BC, you may have to kind of learn us on how the rules of hockey go, because Dwayne and I, we grew up in the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just didn't have a lot of hockey growing up.
No.
Um, but anyway, unless you have something else,
No. I'm good.
all right. Well, I'll just say see ya and God bless.
God bless.